from being scanned with this. And then you can disable the account so that the scanner really can't get back in. There's a lot of different policies that you can set. We're not really sure what the exact set of policies that we want to enforce is. There's a Summer of Code project that's researching this, that's going to put this on some real applications and watch what kinds of thresholds are reasonable for an enterprise security, an enterprise application. Then we'll get some good data about what kind of policies we can enforce. But again, this is a very naive implementation. I can imagine somebody plugging in a Bayesian rules engine here and doing some real interesting intrusion detection. We're just trying to prove the concept that intrusion detection inside the application is the way to go. You can't enforce these kind of policies with a standalone intrusion detection box on the wire. You have nowhere near the amount of information that you need in order to detect an attack like this. Okay, so that was my whirlwind tour of ISAPI. Question, yeah.
So is it natively designed for whitelisting so that you can actually say to this legitimate scanner, please don't block? Is it designed for that as well?
Yeah, you could set that up. In the intrusion detector, you could easily create an exception for that. We don't have any configurable policy about that now, but it's certainly a good idea because people do want to scan their own sites. In general, ISAPI has been built to be everything whitelist. We don't do any kind of blacklisting anywhere. It's all about whitelist enforcement of security. And we think that's a lot simpler. Thanks. Okay, so in terms of coverage, if you look at the OWASP top 10, ISAPI has pretty good coverage over the top 10. Certainly way superior to anything you'll get from a static analysis tool or a scanning kind of tool. This is really about prevention. And so we've got controls that will handle input validation and output encoding, so you'll handle all your cross-site scripting. All the injection kinds of flaws, like command injection and SQL injection, we've got stuff for that. We've got a safe upload feature built into the HTTP utilities. That does a whole bunch of checks on any file that gets uploaded to make sure that the file name is legitimate and the size is right and the storage location for it is right, and all that stuff gets checked. I talked about the access reference map for insecure direct object references. We've got CSRF protection built in. There's got a token system built in, all based on strong crypto under the hood. There's the exception handling stuff so that you get good error messages and good logging. We've got broken authentication in sessions. We've got a lot of stuff in there about authentication and session cookies in particular. So anytime you set a cookie, we can have it set the secure flag and the HTTP only flag on that cookie. So I don't know if you followed the recent discussion of surf jacking. ISAPI's got protection against that kind of attack where people are stealing cookies out of the browser. We've got a nice encryptor that does things like encrypt and decrypt. It's also got hash functions. It's got a secure token generation function and a digital signature and verify function built in. We didn't go crazy here. We were thinking of putting in a bunch of certificate functions, but we realized most enterprise web applications don't have to do certificate processing today. We may add that sometime in the future, but we're really trying to restrict it to the functions that are used in the vast majority of apps today. We've got some things about insecure communications, but we can't do everything here, right? We're just in the code. We can't do anything to force you to configure SSL in your server, right? So we don't do everything. We do verify that the channel is secure, and we do the secure cookie checks, but we can't do everything here. And then we've got a pretty sophisticated access controller to allow people to enforce that access control throughout the site. Oh, so I just wanted to point out something about the tools. MITRE did a study a few years ago that looked at all the different tools out there. Steve Christie doesn't like this slide because he doesn't think that this data was intended to be used this way, but I think it's instructive, so sorry, Steve. But if you put together all the claims of all the different tools that are out there and compare it up against the CWE, which has a list of 695 different weaknesses, you'll see that there's only 45% coverage by the tools. That leaves a whole bunch of vulnerabilities that are not covered by the tools. The other thing that they found was that there's not a lot of overlap between the tools. So to get that kind of coverage, you've got to run all of them. It's a pretty expensive way to go. So, I'm not down on tools. I actually really like these tools. I've written static analysis tools. I believe in them. But I want to make sure that people understand that the tools are not going to give you the kind of coverage that you need in order to really to be secure. You can't scan for the OS top 10, right? Those problems are too complicated to scan for in a lot of cases. So I need people to be aware of that. But I do think that the tools are an important part of a balanced breakfast. Like you should have tools as part of your enterprise application security program. All right, so here's where we are with the SAPI. So I started thinking about this a long time ago when we started doing this work and we started seeing these problems, and I had this idea, and then I always figured someone would do it, actually. And time went on, and no one did it, so I started sketching out an informal API, got a bunch of people together. We started a reference implementation, formed an expert panel, so I got some of the serious researchers in the space and got them on a team and started reviewing the API. Then, I guess almost a year ago, we released the first version of it, and we've been working on it pretty heavily since then. The latest release is 1.3.1. It's got all the functions implemented that you've seen, and we're going to have a summit in December, and we want to get together a relatively small group of people to really come together and bear down on this API and make sure we've got everything right. We want to get a really great API here. We're looking at other languages, so we've got .NET and PHP versions in progress. There's alpha stuff out on the web. Someone's building a classic ASP version, which is really cool, and this company Galwa, which does a lot of work for the NSA on high assurance systems, they're building a version of a SAPI in Haskell, which is a high assurance language. It's a functional language. And I'm really psyched about that. They're actually going to use that in their implementation of multi-level secure web stuff that government is going to use. So I think that's pretty neat stuff. We're also looking at extending into other domains, right? So right now, it's useful in web apps and web services, but I would love to make a similar library, maybe it's with some overlap with this library, that supports developers in other styles of computing, like rich clients and JavaScript, AJAX stuff, that kind of things. Those developers need security functions too, and we need to support them with simple, easy to use, high assurance security components. So if anybody's interested in getting involved, I would love some help in those areas. One challenge is framework integration. So a lot of enterprises use frameworks already. And sometimes there's a conflict between what ESAPI does and what the framework does. And it's not always clear how to integrate those things. Probably the right thing to do here is to go work with the framework folks on integrating ESAPI into their framework. So it uses the framework natively, because trying to wedge them together isn't always perfect. So that's something that we're going to try and do over the next year. The other influence that ESAPI is having is, like I mentioned this morning, we are reaching out to some of the platform providers, and they're adopting little pieces of ESAPI. So the Sun servlet spec, the next version, you'll see some of the work that we've done here reflected in the servlet spec. So it's all open and online. This is all under the BSD license. So it should be very easy for anybody to use this stuff in their organization. BSD license is extremely permissive. You should be able to build it into